Hello, everybody. This is Umasankar from ESOP Direct. Hope you are all well. In the meantime, we have planned for a webinar regarding how ESOP strategy can help in making a unicorn in the context of startups. Because the recent background to this topic is that we saw the economic survey for financial year 21-22. That was brought in the context of the union budget 22-23, and in that we got to know certain very good surprising numbers. Certain statistics regarding startups were there. For example, initial startups in financial year 16-17 used to be 733. So in this context, I can say that financial year 16-17 or even few months back, I mean, I'm talking about the January 16, when the Modi government for the first time recognized startups, even though startups used to be there in India earlier as well, but officially that was recognized, and some official expectations were also set there. January 16, when that startup movement officially flagged off. So from that year, I mean, after 365 days, up to March 17, the total number was around 733. But for FY 21-22, the total startup number was recorded as 64,000. So there is a phenomenal growth in the startup number so far. This 64,000 includes a net addition of 14,000 startups, which got added in just last year, in last 365 days or so. So this is phenomenal. So this is one aspect, that this is the startup. I mean, from the startup ecosystem, what the numbers look like. Now, going one step above that, within the startups, if you focus on the unicorns, there are 83 unicorns recorded by January 22, as per the same economic survey. And there is a record addition of around 44 unicorns in 2021. So with this record 44 number in last year, we have surpassed United Kingdom, and we have taken up the third position in the world. That comes after the United States and the China. So this is the these are the numbers, and numbers tell a great story regarding where we are leading to. This is one aspect. If you see another aspect from the voice of the ministers, or some of the ministers, when the ministers are confronting certain questions like disinvestments in PSUs, raising unemployment problems, some ministers heard. I mean, some ministers we have heard who are very vocal in saying that they are expecting the unemployment problem to be solved by the huge number of startups. So, I mean, somewhat, I mean, there is a huge expectation by the government, by the lawmakers, that there shall be startups, there shall be enough unicorns going forward, because it is the big India, and big India wants in a big way. So whatever numbers, the 2 digits of unicorns we have, that might be 3 digits. I mean, that might be 3 digits and going on with fast pace in years to come. So there may be quite good surprises for forthcoming years. So this is one aspect, that government has also set its expectation. So this is regulators' wish from the startup ecosystem, from the unicorns. On the other hand, if you see the societal value, I mean, I'd like to give you a very small example of what is happening in the, in the jobs arena, in the employment arena. The ESOP story has been spread, and rightly spread, in society. So it is no more limited to what is called the yellow papers or business newspapers, but also the normal regular newspapers. People have been conversant with the ESOP stories and success stories. Now, employees, while searching for a job, they are also seeking a piece of ESOPs. They are searching whether a company has ESOP program or not. So they are showing their interest in ESOPs. So there is a paradigm shift in this as far as this societal expectation is concerned. Probably we may very shortly see when parents would be advising their children that don't join a company who has no ESOPs. So that in one way that sets out the significance of ESOPs. So this is the societal expectation from the ESOPs. Now, coming to the entrepreneurs, I mean, whose brainchild is the company, is the startup, and that and many of those may be leading to unicorn status. Talking about those entrepreneurs from their point of view and from the point of view of the investors as well, the shareholders, investors, growth is a key aspect that is always in mind, that we know that so long as a company is living, if you are talking about a going concern, growth is there. The company, that organization is bound to grow like a living organism. So long as that is living, that grows. Growth is uh, never stopping aspiration. It cannot stop. It keeps on giving sleepless nights. It keeps on giving excitements. It keeps uh, particularly the shareholders and other stakeholders, particularly who is at stake. Uh, this concept, I mean, this aspiration keeps them moving, uh, that keeps them motivating always. So growth shall be there, and essentially because our topic is, I mean, transition from a startup stage to the unicorn. So first and foremost thing, that growth should be in focus. That is the key thing on which the whole uh, session is based. So growth is there, and that is naturally there. Given the topic, I mean, we are specially focusing on a startup's progression towards becoming a unicorn. So one unicorn's basic distinctions are that one of the key distinction is when a startup has brought certain disruptions or disruptive technologies, and with a very different approach. They may be doing same things, but in a quite different way, and they are slowly progressing. They are sustaining those disruptions. They're doing those things in a quite unique way. Probably we can say that, I mean, they are slowly uh, approaching towards attaining somewhat like a unicorn in terms of valuation, because unicorn may be a concept from the point of view of valuation, but still that is one thing, that distinction is there. Another distinction is that uh, they have a different approach. So essentially I'm talking about a startup, but that has built into it that disruptive technology, disruptive approach. The second thing which I'm focusing on is what is known as customer centricity or customers focus, or knowing the customer pain points. They pinpoint the solution, and the value the customers needs. They truly know, and they truly wish to know at all points in time what is the customer's requirement, and if it is changing with time, to gauge that and to change their own system to cater to the needs of the customers. That is the second thing. And the third thing is that so these are the basic, I mean, very basic things I'm telling, the broad things, even though we can go a bit deeper into that when we will move to subsequent slides. So these are the basic distinctions, but what is the requirement is that these distinctions must be maintained on a sustained basis. It is not one day or a couple of weeks, a couple of months. Uh, a time frame one needs to maintain those distinctions, but those distinctions must be maintained for a considerable longer period of time. So sustainability is the focus now. So now from the sustainability point of view, even though the entrepreneurs and there may be a good leadership team, but what is important is that I'm now focusing on the employees who would be running the company in a day-to-day basis. And from that point of view, I mean, from the I mean, while I was talking about employees, I would be probably talking indirectly about the ESOPs as well. So, because I had said the context that nowadays ESOPs are somewhat thought, even from a social point of view, that people have started thinking that yes, ESOPs create wealth. So, as a motivator, generally, I mean, ESOPs are thought to be a kind of what is known as unavoidable in that context. So as a motivation, the large mass of employees or a target mass of employees must be focused who could help maintaining these Unicode's basic distinctions on a sustainable basis for a fairly long period of time, needing the retention, needing the motivation, so that the valuations, I mean, I'm talking about not only the quantitative valuations, but from the quality value point of view, those, I mean, those both type of valuations could be maintained in the years to come. So in that context, I mean, we can evaluate that why ESOPs are relevant in a pre-unicorn context, because the moment a startup becomes unicorn, our topic is over. Because we are going to evaluate if ESOPs play any significant role in making a startup a unicorn. So from that point of view, we can examine a few features and why ESOPs are relevant. If ESOPs are relevant, what other aspects of ESOPs would be focused? And I mean, what can be seen as a way forward then? Now moving to key features of a unicorn. Those key features, I mean, it is not a case that these are seen only in a unicorn, but these features are generally seen in a startup, and maybe in the early days of the startup, uh, so that because that startup is expected to be going closer and closer to become a unicorn. uh, uh, I mean, these are some aspects focusing on the operational, financial, and behavioral aspects as well. So, a startup, while gathering these features, uh, that becomes slowly prominent, and its head is visible, uh, as distinct from the others in the crowd. So from that point of view, that prominency becomes more and more prominent, and one day that becomes a unicorn. So what are those key features? So the moment it becomes unicorn, immediately we can see that what used to be the key features, even though from the early days of the startup, these key features might have taken birth in that startup. So first of all, a unicorn is necessarily a startup. So obviously we are focusing a startup, and in that startup, we are going to focus on other parameters. That what other parameters are generally there in a startup that generally makes a startup a unicorn. So as we discussed, I mean, little bit we discussed about the disruptive innovation. Generally, the first movers. It is said that uh, because almost uh, in almost all sectors, in almost all business areas, there are players. But now what is seen is that I mean, these prominent startup companies or prominent unicorns in India, they're not doing a new thing, but they are doing the same thing in a quite different manner. The way of doing thing is totally different. That's why it can be, I mean, that's why we can say that they are the first movers. For example, I mean, uh, receipt and payment of cash, receipt and payment of money in India or elsewhere has been since time immemorial. But the way, say, UPI-based payments have been implemented, and the way we are seeing that even the street vendors, street hawkers are using some prominent apps, I mean, apps of prominent companies or unicorns, very reputed unicorns, those are said to be the first movers. And I mean, it is not a case that only for India, like a big country, there can be only one first mover. I mean, first mover can be one, but there can be two or three major players, but that would not create any difference. And having a second big player may be dampening the business of the first one, but both can, I mean, both can have their sustain, I mean, business in a sustained basis for a longer period. But in any case, that disruption is there. Something like first movership must be there. That is a general characteristic. Another general characteristic is deeply consumer focused and caching of the consumer pain points and greater reach. They generally see in my recent example, what I said is that I talked about the street vendors using smartphones, mobiles, and they're transacting money very easily. And I mean, people are also transacting with money very easily without even minding for keeping the change. And we used to see in past that whenever we didn't have change, we used to get some 1 rupee toffees from the local shops. But that is not the case now, because the transaction happens with the exact transaction amount. So this aids to the consumer convenience. And first of all, I mean, the startups used to identify the pain points, and from the voice of one of the leadership team members of a company which is into distribution of medicines, the leadership team members used to say that they had observed that even in tier 1 cities, if a doctor prescribes 7 types of medicines in a single prescription, uh, even in tier 1 cities, it is difficult to get the exact medicines, all 7 medicines at one place. Persons have to move from here to there to collect all the 7 medicines. But the situation is quite drastic in other cities like tier 2, tier 3, and even rural cities. It is totally, a failed system, where out of 7, probably you have to wait for 7 days to get all the 7 medicines. So they identified that, and they knew the customer pain point, and they approached the market with a solution with a greater reach. So two things: one, giving a convenience to the consumer, for which consumer would be exploring since many days. That is really a pain reliever. The second thing is that they used to have greater reach, I mean, a large base of consumers. The next one could be that, given these typical things, the leadership is leadership is a bit different here. So leadership here, I mean, uh, uh, that seeks to drive people, that seeks to drive performance and value in a quite different way. So people here, because it is a startup company, it is not a conventional company. I mean, we know that, I mean, startups used to have very different aspects of operation, very different kind of people join there, and the performance targets are different. And there are two types of valuations they are essentially focusing. They essentially focus on in terms of quantitative valuation. We know that which technically make a startup into a unicorn. But besides that, every unicorn has a valuation target on the basis of quality. I mean, they wish to be known in the market for a certain purpose. So that also needs a good leadership that needs to be driven, and that needs to be driven on a sustained basis. So that needs altogether different leadership as far as startups are concerned, because they are the startups requirement, that ecosystem is a bit different from the normal traditional companies. Now coming to the extraordinary employee engagement, I mean, we have seen, I mean, it is seen that if we talk about unicorn, or if I talk about a startup which is about to become a unicorn, there must be extraordinary employee engagement. Because if employees are stated to be the growth drivers, growth accelerators, real executors of the entrepreneurs or of the board's execution plan, the people execute. So there must be extraordinary employee engagement that is already there. So unless there is extraordinary employee engagement, who will execute such what is known as a Herculean task Herculean task of huge execution plan. So that is there. Extraordinary employee engagement. So it ends with the employee engagement, or we articulated to end that with extraordinary employee engagement. That is the key, that we have now moved from the top of the pyramid to the bottom. We are now focusing on the employees and employee engagement. Now, in this context, we are not talking about particularly unicorn, but again, I'm reiterating that I'm talking about a startup which is slowly transitioning to become a unicorn. So in that context, what is the role of ESOPs, whether ESOP is relevant, why ESOP is relevant, and how ESOPs could be relevant in that context? Because one day that startup which is slowly transitioning towards a unicorn status is going to be a unicorn. So in that process, whether ESOP will be an accelerator, whether it shall prompt any kind of first transition or transition on a sustained basis. So from that point of view, there are few parameters we can quickly check that what are there essentially. I mean, if we compare ESOPs vis-a-vis the startups, I mean, startups used to have lower valuation in the initial days. So there is no two views on this. So everybody may accept that it has necessarily lower valuation in the initial days. And ESOP by nature, on the other hand, is linked to company valuation. Because it is linked to company valuation, and company valuation is rock bottom in the early days. So the first point could be that because of the lower valuation, and the sky is the limit as far as the ultimate valuation or multiple years valuation targets are concerned. Probably ESOPs can be reserved. ESOPs can be thought to be probably the significant instrument which can be aid to the startup company, which can work as a kind of a wealth creator, because there is enormous growth potential for the future. And another significant thing is that while ESOPs can be given when the valuation is low, the accounting costs shall also be low because the valuation is low. So at the same time, company can grant ESOPs with very lesser accounting cost in the early years or early days. The second point is that because there is high growth potential, high growth potential is coming out of every stakeholder's aspiration. Particularly, I'm referring to all the investors and even knowledgeable employees used to, they have aspiration that yes, company must grow at a high growth rate because it is possible. With this, it creates a substantial wealth creation, expectation that there is a potential for windfall gains. ESOPs make it possible that through ESOPs one can create and one can transfer, one can give an opportunity to get windfall gains. So this is a key motivator, that because there is a high growth potential, and with ESOPs, at least the thought can be passed that yes, there is a chance that the windfall gain can be made out of our future valuations. The third thing, an inherent thing, is that generally startups are low in cash, and low in cash may be understood in two contexts. Maybe a company deliberately keeps low cash because some bigger portion is kept for operational efficiencies or other operation purposes, or it can be inadvertent because say there is no funding, or owing to the very the nature of startups, they are generally low in cash. This is the aspect on one hand. On the other hand, how ESOPs offer benefits. ESOPs can act as currency for hiring and retention, so it helps in cash salary rationalization. For example, if a person has CTC of say 10 lakh, and for his basic subsistence given the age, etc., if the company can offer still say 7 lakhs of CTC, and the rest of the 3 lakh of CTCs can be compensated by way of say even 15 lakh of ESOPs, or maybe say 10 lakhs of ESOPs. And if the employee knows that there is a value creation potential, employee may happily accept that offer. So that may be for the hiring. And as far as retention is concerned, the annual increment can be limited to just to meet the employee's financial requirements, and all other things can be converted into ESOPs, and accordingly ESOPs can be granted, so that there is no pressure on the cash. So cash salary can be really rationalized. So ESOP has that calibrity as well. And the next point is capability to reward and retention. Capability to reward the retention and performance. So periodic reward for motivation, I'm talking about basically. So as an organization, it is quite normal. It is expected that company has to plan for reward, the retention and performance periodically. Now, in that context, we can check whether ESOP has the capability, whether ESOP has that, that nature that can help the company in administering reward for retention and performance. Yes, of course, because whether the company plans for one-off grant, whether company plans for annual grant, whether the company plans for even 6 monthly grants, depending on whenever they are having performance appraisal, or whenever they observe that one or many employees have done extremely well. Irrespective of that, ESOPs can be designed for grant and vesting, and particularly now coming to the sustained corporate growth. If there are two models. One is what is called attainment of the business and valuation milestones. So grant can be made if the company observes that the business milestones and or we have written both, whether business and or valuation milestones have been achieved. On the basis of that, grants can be made. in case it is thought that those milestones are still years ahead, grant can be made on presumption basis, and as and when those milestones would be achieved, then vesting can be allowed. Either case possible. Now coming to, it may not be the last, but because we are talking about the broad pointers, may not be the last point, but it is a very significant point, that in the whole process, starting from the lower valuation, and we discussed that there is a very high potential for the future growth. The potential for high future growth. In this process, we are talking about the wealth creation and the kind of wealth we are imagining, or we are dreaming of, and we are truly dreaming of, and we are truly, say, calculating. That big amount is generally committed by the company, but generally the market pays. So this is the beauty of ESOPs. So ESOP, under the ESOP, what can be possible, that company can commit big, or realistically big. I'm not saying that company can commit anything. So in really, I'm talking about a company which has really a very good future, and we have seen kind of multiple valuations those companies achieve in future. So in that case, company can commit anything, but another person pays for that. So that is the beauty. And how? So long as company remains unlisted, there is no ready market. So the company's commitment that is reflecting in the grant letter, ESOP grant letter, those are monetized by an investor, incoming investor. And in case company goes for IPO listing, then the employee gathers money from the stock exchange, from the general market. So in either case, company never pays. This is the general. But if I talk about some exceptional events, like for a very long period, there is no liquidity event, there is no monetization event, there is no investor coming, or there is no investor wishing to buy out ESOP shares, or there is no listing in near future. What happens? There are two things to happen. In case, even though any investor is not wishing to buying, but if the company has made a good cash reserve, and say there is a considerable time, the grant has been made, employees have been waiting, then company can declare a kind of buyback of options, buyback of shares. Company can itself. So in that case, only that exception thing can happen, where company may be required to pay. That too, if the company has good resource to bear that expense. Otherwise not. But that happens on exception basis. In most of the cases, company commits and market pays, or someone else pays. This boils down to another, what is called efficiency in terms of huge tax savings. So in case a company issues shares whenever there shall be liquidity event, so that the employee can get the shares, sell it, and get the money. So at the time of allotment of shares, whatever perquisite or wealth created by the employee, to that extent, company can save the corporate tax as well. So there shall be a huge tax saving, or that means cash saving by the company, which can be claimed under the Income Tax Act. So this is a beautiful thing, that without real expenditure, how a company can also, in addition to the payment being made by someone else, company can even claim tax deduction out of that wealth creation, which goes to the pocket of the employee. So this is the, all these things are the, those are inbuilt in the nature, or these are the DNA of ESOP, of the startups. So given this DNS, these aspects, the crucial aspects or avoidable aspects of startups, how those aspects can be properly correlated to ESOPs, so that ESOPs can be introduced with a view to bring in much needed efficiency. For example, like low evaluation, because startups have high growth potential, they are low in cash, and even though they are startups, like normal companies, normal employers, they are also required to reward the retention performance. And another beauty is that the company is not required to pay money. They can simply commit, market will pay. So in all these circumstances, ESOP can be used beautifully, to bring in its highest efficiency for the corporate advantage. Now coming to the role of a robust ESOP strategy. So for the time being, if say for a moment we assume that yes, we saw that yes, ESOP could be a very good instrument for a startup. If yes, then what? What are the next steps? How to implement? What could be the ESOP strategy in a startup? First of all, I mean, we know that, I mean, if you're talking about an organization, there must be different types of persons, there must be different types of employees with different expectations, with different roles, different milestones given to the respective classes of employees, classes of individuals. So there is a need for a comprehensive and strategic ESOP plan. So it is not a case that is, a simple ESOP plan or an ESOP plan talking about only one aspect, that cannot fit all. But startups need an ESOP plan that must be flexible, so that under that flexibility, different structures can be applied to different classes of employees with different expectations. So I mean, one ESOP scheme, under that ESOP scheme, the parameters of ESOP allocation may be different from leadership team. I mean, if I compare the leadership team ESOP allocation with the top management vis-a-vis middle management, so on and so forth. And it is also required to see to what extent ESOP should be given, or whether the bottom level should also be given ESOPs or not. So these kind of questions may creep in. But for that reason, the ESOP scheme must be flexible. That is part one. But within that flexible ESOP scheme, what needs to be done is a strategic approach that each individual's role should be gauged in line with the business plan, and accordingly the terms, conditions, criteria of ESOPs may be structured for classes of individuals. So ESOP approach needs, this needs a serious approach. Serious in the sense, simply saying one approach will not fit all. So that needs multiple approach for, for satisfying the requirements of multiple employee classes given the business plan. So in every case, we need to, corroborate with the business plan. That must be, there must be a sync that must be tried to be achieved. Another thing is that whatever we wish to do, obviously any organization, as we know, all the organizations used to think good about employees. They always think the well-being of employees. They plan in with a good thought. But the question is that for whom the company is implementing a scheme, the company is devising certain terms and conditions of ESOPs. They have allocated with certain, certain thoughts and expectations. Whether employees are aware of those terms and conditions, number one. Number two, whether employees are aware of towards what direction the company is moving, whether whether the value of ESOPs is growing or not over the uh, period of time, what has happened to ESOPs. So we in this context, I'd like to give you a real life example that 2 years ago we got appointed for a listed company, and even though we had seen similar experience in unlisted companies, but I'd like to give you an example of listed company because their prices are visible. uh, every day one can see in the stock exchanges. And when we got that assignment, they had already implemented an ESOP scheme a couple of years ago. So we started asking about what is the status of the old scheme, what kind of bottlenecks they are facing, uh, and what is the option status, whether the employees have vested options, whether they are regularly exercising, they are happy, like that. We came to know, to our surprise, that uh, they said that their vested options are lapsing because that company is a listed one. So we were well aware of what was the exercise price. Say exercise price was 100, and the time we got the assignment, the market price was around 300 rupees. So employees were sitting on the cash gain of 200 rupees. So options were clearly in money options. Use, I mean, not very huge. That may be subjective to say whether that is a huge gain or very huge gain. Um, but 200 rupees per option was the gain. In spite of that, we came to know from the ESOP administrator that uh, vested options are getting lapsed. We asked why, because no one is exercising. So it is a clear case of miscommunication, no communication. Because how come one employee sitting on a pile of cash can ignore exercising the options? Because that is a simple procedure, or whatever procedure is there. If writing some application will give you some money, who would not like to do that? So I mean, in that case, one can say whether employees got rid of wealth, whether employees did not get that motivation, if company would have communicated them in timely manner, on time. In any case, I mean, employees got rid of that happiness, whether wealth or happiness, because they could have easily, they could have made some money or wealth out of it. This may not be true for everyone. I mean, it was not true, I mean, for all the employees in that organization. But we have seen that maximum employees are not aware, because some employees are self-aware, because in case company does not communicate to them out of their own initiative, some employees, handful of employees, in a statistics I like to give you, say out of 100, maybe 10 employees may be self-aware. But 90, my question is on the 90 employees. What would have been the scenario if 90 employees would have been given the proper communication, so that the proper motivation should have come out? Because one of the key objective of ESOP implementation is to bring the motivation. So from that point of view, it is quite essential that there must be effective and ongoing communication strategy. Strategy could be written, could be verbal. I mean, verbal means I'm talking about, say, electronic communication. By whatever means, communication must be done. Or you may have some kind of portal or system through which employees should get the communication. Communication is important. Manner and mode may not be. So this is one, I mean, this is on one part. Another part, so long as startups, of course, I mean, startups predominantly are unlisted, and we are discussing about unlisted startups only. So it is quite important that while structuring a plan, even though the company might have kept some flexibility with it for providing liquidity, for providing money, what we call liquidity event, monetization event, or monetization opportunity, the company should be mindful of gauging of the liquidity requirement of employees at any given point in time. The company should be aware that what may be the money requirement and how long employees have been serving, what is going on around them, what is happening with the peer companies. So to that extent, companies should endeavor for what is called liquidity event management. I mean, I'm talking about giving liquidity or monetization opportunity to the employees periodically, even though company is not required to give an opportunity to monetize 100% is their options, but certainly some calculated percentage of their options. So it is also never, I mean, it never happens that any company would give 100% monetization in a single shot. That never happened with maybe you can take the name of marquee companies like whosoever have become public now, like say Zomato, Paytm, even Flipkart. Flipkart, though not a public company in India, but some liquidity event has happened. So my point here is that even though the management may not intend to give 100% monetization because that is not desired, because soon after getting 100% monetization, if that is a heavy enrichment, some employees may tend to leave. So it may work as a boomerang. But in any case, uh, you know, uh, the company can analyze various situations, including the age group of the employees, the tenure so far, what is happening in the peers, its own pockets as well. So from that point of view, even say if the cash reserve is not so lucrative, then also it can be discussed with investors or so. So that is important. This liquidity, provision is important, and this must be planned accordingly or periodically. Otherwise, there are chances that the scheme may lose the scene. And in case, for whatever reason, the liquidity event is not visible in near, so with effective communication, the employees can feel better and motivated that yes, we should wait for even a greater valuation. So there is no hurry. So these kind of things can be managed. And we talked about as a beautiful ESOP strategy, but that strategy may lead to a legal mess. I mean, if say certain basic, tax, accounting, and regulatory compliances are not met, even though for a startup, government has provided many privileges, and probably few more privileges may be in pipeline. Those may come, but yet I'm talking about those minimal compliances. Those minimal compliances must be met, and those must be identified so that the startup can buy peace of mind, and with little bit of compliance, startup can focus on other operational aspects and can simply go ahead with ESOPs. But in any case, these are the key things. I mean, one company should be mindful of these legal compliances, because valuation is very less today, and when valuation will become quite big, a thing not done in the early stage, if discovered at later stage, probably that small issue might have been big at that point in time. So from that point of view, I mean, a small effort should be made to ensure that all the regulatory compliances have been met. Now coming to yet another, I can say challenge. You can say it is kind of challenge. It may be a challenge for a company, and particularly a startup company, where we have seen, and you can also appreciate that startup companies generally never prefer to keep in-house resources for certain functions. I mean, if startups think that ESOP is a specialized service, it needs special attention, and some kind of, say, professional, management or professional advisory like that. In any case, if a startup has its own capability, startup can create its own system for administration. Otherwise, startup can focus on outsourcing that. But in any case, to ensure that whether managing that in-house or managing that by outsourcing, it has to be ensured that this day-to-day ESOP management is going on smoothly without, frequently bringing the issues to the boardroom, because board has to do the work hassle-free without, this kind of hassles. I cannot say small things, but these small things may sometimes create ruckus. So here in this context, I can give few examples that effective day-to-day ESOP management means people may be hired from time to time, maybe every day, every week, or every month, new persons may be joining. So if company considers fresh grant, then how the grants shall be made? If there is a full-fledged HR team, well aware of the ESOP procedures, they can create the grant letters, issue that. I mean, this kind of things can happen, signing of papers like that. But if you have a platform, through that platform, necessary data can be fed, and the grant communication can be made hassle-free electronically. This is about the grant. Other dynamic things keep on happening, like people changes, people leave the organization. In that case, options lapse, and certain options need some different treatment that must be recorded, because options are legal instruments. So from that point of view also, those events need capturing of ESOP treatment appropriately. So I'm talking about that system that should be capable enough to capture this kind of eventualities. And the third thing is, when the exercise is near, so exercise can also be hassle free. So electronically ESOPs can be exercised. And the fourth thing could be simple communication with the click of a button, or by way of a mobile app. If employees can get to see their ESOP status, what is the value today, that can also serve as a communication. Apart from, this system can be used as a administration platform. So these are the overall things that that talks about why a robust strategy is necessary for a startup to help it transitioning towards, achieving bigger, and even bigger, ultimately attaining a unicorn status. Now moving to the conclusion. I mean, we discussed about the number of unicorns in India, that is around 83, and only last year we added 44 unicorns. So the rate of change is really very fast, and we can easily get a 3-digit number next year, but that number would be really growing very fast. So this, I mean, this is a statistics that is suggesting, I mean, what is going to happen. This is one part. And in that context, if you see the role of ESOPs, I mean, this has been historically proved to assist in making of unicorns. Though I'd like to tell that ESOP is not the only factor that makes unicorns. Of course, I mean, ESOPs always assist the management in having, in obtaining good valuations, in obtaining, in achieving milestones quicker than that is scheduled, because the employees would be really motivated. Why I said, I mean, ESOPs have been historically proved to assist in making unicorns. If you see the listed unicorns in India, and if you also see the pattern of ESOPs given to them, and the way ESOPs created wealth for the respective individuals, particularly the leadership team And talking about even normal persons who, I mean, if we talk about say Paytm or Zomato, these are the matters, even those appeared in the newspapers, even though we have analyzed their red herring prospectus, and these are the facts on record that there are many millionaires. I'm talking about the normal employees. Even there are certain leadership team members who have earned or who has the accrued value up to even 100 crores INR. And definitely, that must have motivated them uh, to quickly transit to the unicorn. And in that context, we discussed that a robust ESOP strategy seems a prerequisite because employees are the wheels of the car, and for a good motivation and to keep them motivated at all times, uh, ESOP is absolutely necessary. Uh, this can be psychologically analyzed, but in any case, that has been historically proved and statistically proved as well. So, in this context, the role of ESOPs can be again redefined. It can be reviewed if you have, or if you don't have. It can be seen, it can be tested that to what extent it can provide effectiveness. With this, I can close this session and we can come to question answers. Thank you.